The original Warzone first released March 10th, 2020, and it remains one of the highest rated Call of Duty games of all time, with a positive Google user review score of 92%. And yet, you cannot play this game. This video is the last ever footage of Warzone. And when Call of Duty announced a couple months ago that they were going to shut down the servers for Call of Duty Warzone, I had a mission, a quest, to be the last person to play and win a game of Warzone ever. So sit back, relax, and let me show you one of the most devastating losses to video game history. And looking back at it, Warzone had a really weird launch. No one knew it was going to launch. It kind of just came out on the March 10th, and they released a trailer for it a mere 30 minutes before the game actually came out. No one had any indication this was in the works. It was a surprise to everyone. One of Call of Duty's best kept secrets, and it is arguably the best battle royale game of the last 5 years. The game had a huge selection of weapons, a massive amount of lootable cash, and easily the best audio with an almost satisfying sound to every in-game action. The game gave you the ability to make custom weapons designed by you for you, something that no other battle royale had done. However, no one knew this game was going to be released until the day it released. And within the 3 years since release, the game amassed over 120 million users, meaning that for every 50 people you meet in your life, at least one will have played Warzone. Warzone was a huge part of Call of Duty history, and it was a huge part of video game history, and it had a huge impact on a lot of people's lives. But I wanted to. I had to be the last person to play Warzone 1 before the game shut down forever. And to do this, I had to figure out a way to guarantee I would be in the last game of Warzone ever played. And to be the last person alive, I had to win the entire game. I had to win the last game of Warzone ever. But this was going to be no easy task. I had to research the heck out of this game. I had to know exactly where to be and when to be there, how the game system worked, how to optimize myself so I could make it in that last game. So the first problem to solve was I had to be in the last servers getting shut down, and I had to figure out how Call of Duty ran their servers. And so after hours of searching and days of research, I finally came across a blog post from a former server engineer for an undisclosed game company explaining how server shutdowns actually work. With server shutdowns, you usually have one main central place where the servers are controlled from. They actually have a set of servers there themselves that kind of control the servers for everywhere else. And there are tons of little server locations around the world, but there is only one central location. And that central location would have to be the last one with the server shut down. When a server shutdown begins, they start deactivating the ones the farthest away from the server location first, and shut down the actual server last. And after an enormous amount of research, I finally discovered the main source, the main server system of Activision Blizzard was located in Southern California. So now I had another problem. I either had to pack up all of my stuff, pack up my entire setup, move my entire setup to Southern California and play on somebody's Wi-Fi the last game of Warzone ever, or I had to figure out a way to spoof my location so it looked like I was in Southern California. And I was able to do this thanks to the power of a VPN. And I had to pay extra money so that way my server connection would be the fastest of anything I could get. With a server connection out of Southern California, close to the server connection for Activision Blizzard, I could guarantee I was in the last servers getting shut down for Warzone. But I had to solve another problem. I had to maintain my connection to the matchmaking system for Call of Duty Warzone longer than anyone else. Call of Duty automatically updates your game playlist when you return to the main lobby. So I couldn't return to the main lobby. After the game ended, I had to keep myself in the system. And I was able to accomplish it by using the in-game play again menu. When I died, I would hit play again from the in-game menu, and this would not disconnect me from the system. It just kind of moved me around from one location to another, and this kept me in there longer than anyone else. The next problem that I ran into was the hardest to fix, the hardest to solve, the hardest to properly accomplish. In order to be the last person in Warzone, I had to get a Warzone victory. Second place wouldn't do. First place meant that you were the last person alive in Warzone, and you would be the last person connected to the server. So I had to enter the highest stakes game of Warzone that I had ever played in my life. This game involved me doing things that I normally wouldn't do, busting out every single strategy that I had ever learned. Every little cheesy exploit I could find, everything that I could possibly do to win this game. I had gone to this game with the best possible loadout set up for me so that I could win the game. And then the game started. With roughly 108 players, after sitting in the lobby for a mere 60 seconds, the game started. I couldn't drop hot. I had to drop somewhere cold where I could get looted up and try to make myself the last person alive. And luckily for me, dropping cold worked out great because I was able to get some weapons, and as I moved to the next location, I quickly ran into an enemy that was no trouble for me at all. I was able to quickly pick them off and keep going on with a mission. Now, I didn't want to go fight a bunch of people, but I didn't want to avoid fights entirely. I would not feel great about myself if I camped the entire game, so I try to stay on the move. Try to stay somewhere near the center of the circle, but not too close where there's going to be a ton of people. And I had to pull out every single stop. I hid at some points when enemies were nearby. When there was a ton of enemies, I tried to third party whoever was the lowest. And in one of these numerous firefights that I got into, I actually lost. I had to go to the gulag and fight for a chance to come back, and I couldn't lose this gulag. I pulled out every single fast move I could to get there and be there before the enemy, so that way I ensured I won that game of Warzone. I was playing solos. There was no way to get me back. The stakes were incredibly high, and this is that exact moment when I killed the enemy in the gulag. And I returned to find that the circle was actually going to be one of the hardest circles that I actually returned to. It was the least covered area I had ever seen. There was not a lot between me and the center of the circle, and I quickly landed on the edge trying to just hold out in a tower and try to pick off someone coming in. And luckily, me sitting there and waiting paid off. I was able to pick off this guy right here who was rushing in at the last second. He was on the back foot and I was just on the edge of the ring. And after killing him and getting some weapons, I began to run to the circle where I discovered my loadout was still there. I could still pick up my loadout crate. So I quickly ran over, and as I was running to my loadout crate, I noticed that there was a dude hanging out up here on this camp to the right. And I couldn't go pick up my loadout without being exposed in the open, and I had to go push the guy. As I got up there, I quickly lost sight of him. I couldn't figure out where he was. I pulled out the heartbeat sensor and discovered that he was a couple meters away from me. So I got ready, and as he jumped out and tried to get the jump on me, I was sitting there waiting for him, aimed down sights and spraying bullets as soon as he came around that corner. And I quickly melted him, but he almost got me. I was very low on health, so I quickly armored up, got his weapons, got his loadout, and I chose not to go for my loadout crate. I had to avoid it because it was way too out in the open, and there were still people out there fighting near my loadout crate. And then this guy with a Jeep running around trying to hit people with a car was one of the last guys left. And with only one building in the last circle, he was doing pretty good. However, as I looked around, I quickly discovered that somebody who had died just a minute earlier that I hadn't killed had dropped a precision airstrike. And as soon as I called that precision airstrike in, he got out of that car and ran to cover. And as I looked up at the map, I saw that the circle was closing away from me. I had to get into the circle. As I snuck my way around the edge, I noticed that there was only 2 people left. And as I got closer to the final building in the ring, I noticed that there was an error message on the side that one of the other users who were still in the game had been disconnected with the error code Spring Wind, meaning that the server he was playing on had completely lost connection, guaranteeing me to be on the last server of the game. And now it was a 1v1 for the title of the last person to play Warzone and the last person to win a game of Warzone. And it all came to the final moments right here, where I actually engaged in a full-on firefight with him as he tried to jump out of the building and surprise me. And you can see exactly how it turned out. After I had finally finished off the enemy and I had won the game, I immediately went to the in-game menu and tried to hit play again. I wanted to get into the next game as fast as possible. I wanted to stay in the matchmaking system. I was able to get into a lobby, but I was the only one in the lobby. And I was only there for a minute before it kicked me out back to the main menu lobby for Call of Duty Warzone. As I got back out of this lobby, I noticed what the time was. 11:31. 31 minutes after the servers had shut down completely, I had finally been kicked out of the games of Warzone. And I looked at the clock at this exact moment. At 11:29 would have been the last possible second for anyone to have been connected to the Warzone servers themselves. The matchmaking system shut down at 11. The last game you could have entered was 10:59, meaning at 11:29, it was done. And somehow I tricked the system into actually being the last person in the game at the moment. I was in this pre-game lobby waiting for the game to start before it actually just kicked me out at 11:31. At this moment, I was the last person to ever get any footage out of Warzone. I was the last person in the game, and I was the last person connected to the servers. However, the servers didn't shut down for another 29 minutes. As I sat in the lobby, I tried to search for another game, hoping that there was maybe some chance that another game would start. I know it was in vain, but I had to hold out hope. And as the game kept searching and searching, I stared at my character there walking down the endless lobby hallway alone. Like me, he was alone. He was the last one left in Warzone, the last character to ever seen the world of Warzone. And as I sat in the lobby, I had a lot of time to think. The world of Warzone that we had experienced for 3+ years was done. It was really ending. This wasn't some pipe dream. This wasn't some it's going to happen in the future. It was right now, right at this exact moment when Warzone was going to shut down forever. And as the clock struck 12, much like Cinderella, my story came to an end. I was the last person ever connected to the last Warzone server. I was the last person to get a victory in Warzone. And yet, I felt this immense sadness and fondness. A message popped up on screen saying there was a new update available and to please update the game, as it had kicked me out of the servers entirely. And that was it. The ending of Warzone wasn't glorious. It wasn't a spectacle or memorable. It was a quiet departure, leaving these kind of immense feelings of sadness and fondness. We lived and played Warzone extensively for years, and its quiet departure made me reminisce about all the good times we had in Warzone. And it's disappointing the game got shut down. It's the only Call of Duty to ever have got shut down completely, and I hold the title and the honor of being the last person to have been playing in Warzone and the last person to be connected to the Warzone servers ever. And while I hold that honor, it also means that my mission had been accomplished, and that this really was the end of Warzone. There was no tomorrow, and I really want to go back. Warzone was never about the game itself. It was a very well-designed game, but it, like everything, had its faults. But Warzone was special because of us, because everyone hopped in the games together. You could hop in a game and play with someone from a different part of the world and have an absolute blast. You could do crazy and absurd things that no one would ever think of to do in the game of Warzone. Everyone would get on and play together, and it was an experience that we all got to enjoy. It was something that's going to live in our hearts forever. Warzone was about the friends, the experiences, and everything else that we did in the game. Sure, the game was great, but we'll never have that opportunity again to experience something like this, something like we had experienced with Warzone 1. And so it's finally time for us to say goodbye to Warzone.